My name is Allie Franklin Carter, and in September of 1955, I joined the U.S. Navy under their electronics training program. I wanted to become a radar technician, and so I went to basic training in Great Lakes, Illinois, and went to ET school in Great Lakes, Illinois, graduating in the fall of 1957. I think it was around October. And I chose as my duty station a radar picket ship called the USS Kretschmer, DER 329. It was a converted destroyer escort, and it was destined to have the latest radar equipment that the Navy had for air search and surface search. And we were stationed in the North Atlantic between Argentia, Newfoundland, and the Azore Islands. We were stationed across that, and we tracked everything that we could see both on the surface and in the air, and we reported it to NORAD in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And if it was an unknown, they would scramble fighters out of Westover, Mass to come out and investigate if we had an unknown target. Had a very unusual experience. I was a radar specialist, and my job was to maintain the radars aboard the ship. It would have been the early summer of 1957. I also, because the ship was undermanned, I also served as a radar operator. So I served 4 on and 8 off duty watches as an operator if there was nothing wrong with the radar. And I got off duty one night at midnight and went to bed, and I was called and told to come fix the radar. There was something wrong with it. And so when I got up to CIC and I asked them what the problem was, they said, well, we're tracking an aircraft here at 3,400 miles an hour. And I said, well, there is something wrong. So I took that radar offline, put the standby radar online, and went to work. And I started running all the tests, and everything was normal. And I completed all of the preliminary tests that you would run to check out a radar, and everything checked out absolutely normal. So I went back into CIC, and I said, what did the target just before this, what did they do? And they said, well, they were perfectly normal. It was an airliner, and it was the right course and speed. And by this time, an hour had gone by, and I said, well, what are you tracking now? And they said, well, on the other radar, everything's tracking fine. So I said, well, let's put this back on. We put it back online, and they were tracking normally. Everything's normal. So as a result of talking with them, I said, I can't find anything wrong with the radar. But there was clearly, they had clear plots, and they told me, it was an absolute stellar contact, because you usually get the size of the blips usually do with either the size of the contact or the shape, something, and this was a blip that was better than a ½ inch across, which indicated a really large target or something very close. And so they said it tracked every sweep. We got a blip, and if you get anomalies, usually what will happen is every sweep or every other sweep you'll get a blank, or maybe every 10 sweeps, but it'll blank out. But this one was solid on every sweep, and that indicates a solid target. So I asked the duty officer if he was going to report it, and he said no. And I said, why not? And he said, well, he says, you've just told me there's nothing wrong with the radar. You've run all the checks you can run. There's nothing wrong with the radar. We know we tracked the thing. If we report it, then Colorado Springs is going to ask us what's wrong with our equipment, and you've already said there's nothing wrong, so you and I then have a problem. We both are in trouble. We got to come up with a story. And he says, I'm not going to report it. It was one contact, that was it. I said, that's fine with me. So I went back to bed. So one night I was on the plot board. This was maybe 3 or 4 months later, and here comes this contact. And the second blip, you could see that this thing was moving. It was moving like 3 or 4 inches on a 360-mile scale. And so sure enough, I plotted it, and it was 3,400 miles an hour. And again, we didn't report it, but they said, you know, there's nothing wrong. This is our friend back, and away we went. And nobody thought anything about it. It was interesting. We didn't make a big deal out of it, but we sure like to know what that was. 3,400 miles an hour in 1957. And the closest thing that we had was about 1,100 miles an hour that had ever been told to us that we might have or might encounter. It happened during the year, the last part of '57 and up until May of '58. It happened at least 3 more times that I had radar operator friends that would tell me, well, we had another one of those fast ones last night. And it always was at night. That's the only other anomaly. I couldn't tell you what time of night. I doubt very seriously that in 1956 and '57 that the U.S. had craft, even in the experimental stage, that could fly 3,400 miles an hour repeatedly. I think that, in particular, where this was, if this would have been a test range or we'd have been sitting down in somewhere in Utah and, you know, they could have been coming over from Nevada or something like that, that's different. But we're sitting in the middle of the North Atlantic with it at least 1,200 miles to any land. So they were flying around the top of the globe with those kinds of speeds for those lengths of time to get from land point to land point. I don't believe we had anything, because I was kept abreast and we were told of all of the latest missiles, all of the latest aircraft that any of the foreign countries had. I was on a secret, on a need-to-know basis, but I was shown radar systems and other stuff that was from Russia, and I'm quite sure that the people were concerned about the fact that they didn't know what it was. We didn't have anything that would fly that fast, and that they decided to limit that information, not to let the Russians know what we didn't have or didn't know. And they didn't want anybody to know anything about what we were seeing. And I think that started it, and then it got out of hand. But I know that the only people that they're keeping it secret from today are the Americans. Everybody else knows about it and accepts it. And all the other governments in the world, except England and the U.S. primarily, are accepting it. It's very irritating to me personally to see that go on, because I have thought a lot about how your life would change if the government came out tomorrow and said that we've been lying to you. Well, we all know now that that would be nothing new. They've lied to us for about almost anything. But I think people are at the point where they could accept the fact that they're going to have to make their car payments and their house payments next week the same way they did before this announcement.